Hello, beautiful lights, and welcome to another episode of From a Medium's Perspective. Today, I have a guest that I'm just going to be delighted to introduce to you in just a moment. But before I do, I want to give you something to think about. Each of us searches for our life path. We search for our purpose and a meaning of being. And for some, that comes in our day-to-day activities, our one-on-one contact with the people in our lives. For others, we work with small groups. For other larger groups. And those that are considered famous are really just ordinary people who have made an extraordinary difference, and they've been recognized for it. Our guest today, Carol Lam, is one of those individuals who has made an extraordinary difference. She is the founder of the Rainbow Light Foundation, and she's been instrumental in founding spiritual communities since the early 1990s. She is an author, she is a teacher, she is a spiritual leader, a consummate metaphysician. She is a holistic practitioner. And the topic that we're going to be talking about today is the continuity of consciousness, past lives, and how that might affect us in this life. And in a moment, I'll get her to explain a little bit about the Rainbow Light Foundation. She's also founded the Academy of Spiritual Sciences. She's found that the role that soul memory plays in the continuity of consciousness is an important thing to understand. So today she's going to be talking to us a little bit about why past lives would have any impact on our personal lives today, but a little bit more about her. She's written a book called Born Remembering, which is a biographical account of the direct communicated guidance which explained past life memories that was her experience from childhood. And we'll again let her talk about that. She has 20 years of experience in nursing, social work, and adult education. And you might think, well, what's that got to do with anything? But it evolved into a holistic therapy practice and a very innovative teaching program of metaphysical sciences. And that's why I have her here on the show. In 2002, she founded the Rainbow Light Foundation. It is an international not-for-profit, and it is a healing and teaching trust, and that continues her work. The Academy of Spiritual Sciences is the teaching body for her International Quantum Light Accredited Therapist Training Program. Quite a mouthful. We'll have her tell us a little bit more about that too. And she integrates medical and soul sciences. That, I think, is the future. I think she's like the John the Baptist or something of that blend of soul sciences and medical approaches, because, of course, we are whole beings. And her current focus is more maybe with the writing and broadcasting, but she continues as director of the Living Memory Research Trust and plays her part in continuing to bridge that gap between science and spirit. She's really a woman after my heart. Also, she has a blog talk radio channel, which you might want to check out. It's called Paranormal Matters. And for those of you that like to check on our guests while the show is going on, you can find her information at rainbowlight.uk.com. Carol Lam, welcome to our show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, Tracy. And thank you for a very kind introduction.
You're a very interesting person, and I'm just tickled beyond measure to have you with us on the show. I think the first thing I want to talk about is just in very simplistic terms, something about the concept of past lives. Because I know for myself, for the majority of my life, I didn't really AKA believe in past lives. And then I had a relationship with a young man a few years ago, and I started having past life memories, and I didn't know where to put them because I didn't have a belief system that supported them. So maybe you can educate our listeners a little bit about what they are and maybe why they would be important at all.
Yes, well, I'll do my best. I think if we begin by thinking of what past life or the term past life means, it means different things to different people, of course. So for some people, they have no belief at all, of course, not only in the fact that we live a continuity of lives, but, we have a soul or a spirit. There's a whole range of belief systems. And many of the religious traditions appear not to speak of past life or the continuity of the soul in this way, when in fact they actually do. The concept of the continuity of the soul, or the fact that the soul not only survives death, but returns and lives more than one life, that it's multidimensional, is actually enshrined in the major religions, but it's at the core. So it tends to be the exoteric teaching gives the journey of the soul through life and a possible afterlife. Where at the core of the major teachings, there is very much a belief in the fact that the journey is actually defined by our experiences, and that the soul returns and returns to refine its understanding, its spirituality.
Yes, it does make a great deal of sense. And I wanted to interject that the concept that we have an eternal soul is something that most mainstream religions do adhere to. But I know locally in the US, we have a little bit of a problem because it's sometimes conventionally looked at, I should say, as we're born, boom, out of nowhere, and we continue forever. And that, everything that occurs within this very short lifespan determines the rest of that existence. It's never made quite a great deal of sense to me. Well, you can comment on that if you have anything. And then I wanted to know how you got started. You had mentioned a childhood experience in your biography, and I was curious.
I'll go on to talk about that, Tracey, but just briefly to say, I would just say that if we have only one life and we continue the life in the other world or the other dimension, it seems extremely unfair, because it's very clear that the world is a very unfair place. We may be all created equal, but we certainly don't have equal opportunity. We know we should have, and we promote that. But the reality is that people live very, very different lives. And I would say that is very much connected to our past experience and also to our life plan and the intention that the soul has to further its experience. So it's a very complex area. But perhaps I might just spend a little bit about what my early childhood memories were, how they occurred.
Yes, I would be very interested in that.
Well, the first time that I became aware of anything really quite dramatic was at the age of 7. And just to say briefly, I do talk about all these experiences in more detail in the book. That's why I wrote it.
Yes, and the name of the book again for our listeners?
It's Born Remembering.
Born Remembering. Okay.
Because as a child, I was having experiences which I clearly understood to be related to me. I recognized them as myself. I was not just observing something, but experiencing something. And it very much was recognizable as part of myself. And yet that made no sense at all. I just say that I was a child born into the industrial north of England.
Uh-huh.
I was born in 46, so I'm talking about the early 50s,
Yes.
And these experiences were happening when I was old enough to sort of recognise them. Now, the first one occurred when I went to the cinema and I was watching a film which, very briefly, the setting was a desert setting, and it was about a Bedouin story. Mm-hmm. And very suddenly, I found that the clothing that I was wearing had disappeared. I was sitting in ordinary coat and shoes of a 7-year-old at the cinema. And suddenly this clothing, this sensory feeling changed completely. The clothing wasn't there anymore, and I felt myself to be swathed in some kind of robe. But the most dramatic part of that was that my vision was very limited. So it was like, the only way I could describe it as a child, it was like looking through a letterbox. So I was looking through a narrow slit, if you like, which of course made no sense to me. But I was also feeling that suddenly I wasn't in the cinema anymore. And I was feeling that I was actually sitting on a camel.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. I love that.
I could feel the camel. I could smell the camel. I was aware of the camel being very tasselled, having brightly coloured tassels, which, of course, you know, as a 7-year-old child in the north of England, I had no conception at all of that. Very quickly, the same way, it disappeared. So I was back sitting in the cinema seat and wondering what on earth that was about. Now, that was very, very clear and very dramatic. I never told anyone about it for the simple reason there was no one to tell.
Yes.
How do you explain these experiences to people who will just dismiss them, and certainly from a child?
Absolutely. Yes.
So, of course, children normally do that. And, of course, that dampens down the psychic abilities at a very early age. I was naturally psychic and obviously not aware. And throughout my childhood, these kinds of experiences continued. And they ranged. They proved to be extremely important. They weren't ad hoc experiences. Each one of them, they were very precise, very different. The next one was of a Japanese girl wearing a very heavy kimono with the hair swept up and the flowers in the hair. I was very aware of the makeup on the face, the white face, and so on, and a feeling of sadness. So very different from the first one. But again, the sense, the actual feeling of the clothing, not just imagining or looking at the thing.
I love that, the sensory feeling of it and the precision of it. You know it's a memory. It is like a part of us.
Yes. It's almost more real than real.
Yes, yes. I know what you mean by that.
There were several others, which I won't go into in depth. But I had several of these memories which left a profound impression. But as I say, I didn't speak to anyone about them. I just kept them to myself. They went on until the age of about 12. The last one, which was different, was rather than being a past life memory, it was actually, I didn't know it at the time, of course, but I later realised after a lot of research, I found out that this was precognition. So I was actually experiencing, this is wide awake, this isn't a dream, experiencing looking at a room and seeing myself in the room and also seeing someone else in the room who I was speaking to, a feeling of sort of apprehension, not fear, but nervousness and apprehension, which didn't really make sense because the person I was speaking to was being quite genial and smiling, and I was handing him something. It was a sort of a brown packet or package, and I was passing this to him, and it felt to be very, very important. And he took it from my hand. Now, it was many, many, many years later that I found out what that was actually about. The person in question was a priest. This is in real time now. A Catholic priest. In the image, I had the distinct impression that this was a priest. But again, I was just a child. It made no sense to me. Many, many, many years later, in my 40s, in fact, after I'd done an awful lot of work, I actually met this person. And the whole scene played out. I handed him a packet which contained details about the church's position on reincarnation. The church had removed the teaching on reincarnation in the very early centuries of Christianity.
Let me ask you, the references to reincarnation or multiple lifetimes, however one might think of past lives, or simultaneous or whatever, was that contained in the Gnostic Gospels?
Of course, yes.
Okay, so, I haven't had a chance to read them, but I'm quite sure I should.
Yes, too. I've spent 25 years researching so much of this history because I knew nothing, of course, about, and certainly not as a child, of course. I had no particular religious background at all. I was always looking. I was always, I feel, spiritually aware, but I could never find the church that I wanted to attend. And so throughout these early years in childhood, I was actually trying the different denominations.
I did the same thing. I was searching for an outward banner to house my experiential base under. Yes, I can relate to that.
I think it happens to a lot of people.
Yes.
I mean, of course, sometimes people find what they're looking for. Other times they can feel disappointed, disillusioned. And each time I thought I'd found the denomination that felt right to me, it would fall short in some way.
Yes.
And it would usually be because in a sermon or someone would be speaking to me. At Sunday school it happened. And they would correct me in my belief that there was more than one life. And of course, as soon as they did that, I knew this wasn't the church for me. And so I was continually looking to try to understand what these experiences were showing me, but couldn't find the church. Now, the link to the priest and the precognition, the forward flash rather than a past life flash, that's very much linked to life plan. And I'm sure many listeners will be aware of their own experiences where they've investigated and researched and studied why they're here, what their life, their particular life is about this time. And of course, it's a fascinating subject. But I would just say that for me, that particular experience from childhood very much imprinted on me a need to find out and to speak to someone about why had the teachings been removed from the church.
Absolutely.
Jesus taught reincarnation. Now, a lot of people have a difficulty with the idea that Jesus taught reincarnation. But again, I think it depends on what you think reincarnation is.
Exactly.
If you think it's just popping in and out of life and one day you're a frog and another day you might be a teacher or another day you're a pauper, there's a place for that belief. But that's not my belief. I believe that we are refining the soul through our experience. We're meant to be returning to clear some of the errors, if you like to call it that, the past mistakes that we may have made. And not less than that, to actually continue the work that we've accomplished or started in other times, in other lives. The flash that I had of the future and this strange passing this packet of information to this person, when I eventually met that person, he was actually a Catholic priest in the church. And you can imagine that's quite a challenge.
Yes, it would have been.
To actually tell him about my experiences and discuss them with him and ask for his own views of that, which of course would be at odds with Catholic teaching. The guidance that I received, because from childhood, as I was growing up and right through my life in different ways at different times, I have been very closely guided. And I had to learn how to follow the guidance and test the guidance, of course, to the best of my ability, and to see what happened when I followed it and what happened when I didn't.
Yes, and we learn that way. We learn that way in our soul. We learn that little voice that tells us, I don't think you should do that, or don't trust this person, or maybe a positive thing like try that, or take your umbrella. We don't listen. I'll argue even now, like I do this professionally, like I give sessions and, I work professionally to do this, but sometimes it'll be like, take your calendar, and I'll be like, I don't need it. And I always do, because that voice never lies. Sure. That information is never inaccurate if we listen correctly.
And it's from the smallest thing in everyday life, as you describe in there, to the most profound details of why we're here any one time, why we're here in the current life, what the soul is trying to achieve. So for me, a very important piece of guidance that I received, as I say, in my 40s this was when I asked, Why had I been shown this particular image, this flash? It wasn't an image, it was an experience, a precognition.
Yes.
What did it mean? What was the purpose? And the answer was to open a dialogue with the Catholic Church. You can imagine my response to that.
Why me?
It was the very last thing I wanted to do, to continue approaching this person who was actually very kind and very understanding, but could also be very blunt as well. It wasn't easy until I felt that I'd passed on the information that I'd been asked to pass on. I couldn't let it go. I had to keep meeting and having these discussions. I could only do what I could do from my side, because I think that's an important lesson in life, that yes, we may come into life with all kinds of intentions and hopes and expectations of what we feel we can achieve. Once we come into the physical dimension, it's very different. And of course, it's also reliant on other people and their cooperation. So each one of us can only do what we can do at any one time. And we have to know when to stop and when we've done the best we can do. It's the time to go.
Yes. I want to ask you to differentiate something. I want to preface that with, I've often thought of our will. We think about having free will, but I think of that, and I haven't really read anything about this, but I feel like you would know. I think of it like we have sort of an etheric will that is never violated, and then our material will is definitely violated. What would you say on that?
The guidance that I've received through the years was very much concerning that, and that free will is everything, of course. If anyone ever tries to force or direct or compel us, not only is it wrong, it's pointless. All that happens is we're sidetracked, and the will reassert itself at some point. It has to feel right for us. We have to make our own choices and decisions. So I think we do come to life with, I don't believe we have a fixed destiny, if you like, but I do believe that we have a road plan with many things along the way to accomplish, some of which we manage, some of which we don't.
I've thought of it maybe in the sense of things that are written at the etheric level, like maybe perhaps our lifespan or certain people that join us in our path down here might be written, so there's sort of some maybe, fixed points that I think could probably be changed at that level if your energy is working at that level, but the rest of it occurs down here. And yes, we do have a great deal of free will down here. It's a little bit different, the way that it's executed, because the decisions that we would make out of body, we can see the totality of everything that we've experienced past life-wise and otherwise. And then in our material life, we're slogging through life, trying to do the best that we can. In readings, I don't like to tell someone there are no choices, because there are many things, many more things that are influenced by our will. There are a few things that will happen irregardless, just because they were decided at a higher level. And if you have an issue with that, you're going to have to deal with it.
I agree completely with that. My understanding has been, I've had the roadmaps shown, not only my own, but other people's, shown to me on numerous occasions. And if you like, there's a blueprint of what's possible. And then there's the life choices that we make. Very often they're deviations from the potential blueprint. Sometimes that's not a failure. That's just a choice to do the same thing a different way. Sometimes we take the longer route when we could have actually had the same lesson and achieved the same result in a shorter time. But it's all learning.
Yeah, and maybe all paths still lead to Rome. Whichever path we take, it's okay, because we're learning an aspect. Today we're talking with Carol Lam from the UK. Her web address is rainbowlight.uk.com for those of you just tuning in. If you missed the first half of the show or wanted to listen to any of our previous shows, you can find them on YouTube at youtube.com and put in either medium Tracey Lockwood or put in From a Medium's Perspective and you'll find them. They're also, so far, all of them are cataloged on a page on my website at mediumtracylockwood.com, and that's Tracy with an EY, mediumtracylockwood.com. They're on the radio show / YouTube page. Next week, I'm going to be talking to you on a solo show about how to get a better reading. So come listen to what I have to say about that. Most people worry about the performance of the psychic or medium, but there's some things that you can do to get a better reading. So tune in for that. So Carol, we have been talking about the continuity of consciousness through past lives. And I really love that you pulled out that when you do have a past life memory, it's really a full-on sensory feeling as if you are experiencing it or a memory of having experienced it. It's very precise. And I was curious, before we get back exactly to what we were talking about, to ask you, do you work with clients? And if you do, when you delve into past lives, do you use a regression therapy or do you, like I do it intuitively and hope that they kind of remember along with me? I don't know. Sometimes people will bring past lives to me and we'll tap in together. How do you approach that?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because usually past life recall is linked to hypnosis, hypnotherapy. Not always, but frequently. And I personally don't use hypnotherapy at all. And the reasons for that, I feel it's absolutely essential that people access the memories appropriately in time.
Yes. Oh, yay. I'm very much a pure altered states fan. I feel like any suggestion from any party, however beautiful or well-intended, especially in that state where we're kind of between sleep and wake, we're so suggestible at that point. It's a very vulnerable state in one way, a very powerful state in another way.
Yes, and I think this is probably a good point for me to say that you mentioned earlier about, we were talking a little bit about the will, the higher self or the higher will, or whatever term you want to use, that element of ourselves which knows the plan will be best outcome for us and tries to guide us in that direction. And then, of course, there's the will, which is part of the mind, and the logic, which of course has a direction of its own often. Now, the space in between those two, we're talking about energetic connection, and we're talking about the anatomical connections between the body, not just the brain, but the mind itself. And then beyond what we term the lower mind to the higher mind. Now, unless you're actually accessing the higher mind, you will not be reaching the spiritual connection regarding the life plan.
Yes.
And you will not get the understanding in terms of what the past life images or flashes or stories may be trying to tell us. Because those images and the impressions, they may be very vivid, they may come through dreams, but they're actually connected to the imprints within the electromagnetic field. So they're actually trying to be healed. They're coming forward. They're carried forward from the past when the energy field is imprinted with some kind of experience, a trauma, whatever it may be. They're not all bad, of course. They're very positive past life experiences.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
I think it's all trauma, and of course it isn't. But it's the trauma memories which looking to be healed. So to do that in the most effective way, I believe that we have to go beyond the band of the energy field where those imprints sit. And to do that, we really need to understand the electromagnetic field. And we also need to acknowledge the higher self and that it is sitting in another place.
Would you explain for some of our listeners, maybe in a rudimentary sense, what you mean by that electromagnetic field? I hadn't really thought of it in terms of right brain, left brain.
Sure.
What is the right brain
Yeah.
being a higher mind? I never thought of it that way. That's so interesting.
In the most simplistic terms, what we refer to as the aura or the auric field is the electromagnetic field, and it's a vibrational field of many frequencies. Some of those frequencies relate to sensory perception, some relate to cognitive faculties, and some relate to intuition and the higher faculties. So depending on which vibration we're connecting to, then we see that's the perception. So to do this work as well as we can, we need to, first of all, recognize that there are the different vibrational frequencies, that those frequencies have been impaired in some way, sometimes in a very minor way, sometimes in a major way through trauma of past experience, which of course can relate to this life, never mind to any other life. But we know, for example, that children in life today carry their experiences forward and try to make sense of those experiences. That's only one little part of the puzzle.
Yeah.
If we think of the imprints being multidimensional, and that to understand them fully, yes, we can engage with them, we can observe them, we can feel them. To have an understanding of them, the understanding comes from going beyond. So we need to go beyond that band, that level of what is the auric field, in simple terms, to the intuitive faculty which connects to the higher self. The higher self will always guide us in the right direction and will help for the imprint to be released. So just connecting with an imprint or with a story or with an impression, that's not the healing. Mm-hmm. The healing is to let it go. And to let it go, we usually need to understand something about it. So true soul recall work, memory work on that level, is to take the person through those stages in a very simple way, but not through hypnotherapy. Because hypnotherapy is going through the brain.
Yes.
It's going to the perceptions beyond the brain itself, but it's going into the electromagnetic field. I'm talking about going beyond the electromagnetic field to the higher self, which is the governor of the field.
Yes.
Which knows the truth and knows the origin of these imprints.
Difference between brain and mind.
It's holding the book, and we're looking at the pages or the paragraphs, but the higher perception, the true origin of who we are, is actually holding the record and allowing us to see these paragraphs or pages or sentences sometimes to allow the imprints to come forward. Because if we can integrate the energy, then the energy is strengthened and the field is enlarged and developed. And of course, it brings a deeper understanding.
If you have a client who has come to you for a resolution of a trauma, and you suspect that because it hasn't apparently had any root in present existence, maybe no reason for that, and you start thinking that it might be good to look at previous experiences in past lives, how do you work with that person? Do you get them to recall that, or do you pick up? How do you work with them?
It's almost the other way around, Tracey, because what has happened for me along the way, and certainly how it began, is that people would come along, usually with some kind of intractable illness or condition that they tried every which way to heal, orthodox medicine, medication, and so on and so on. And often it's gone on for many years and they've just not been able to get to the root of it. And quite serious conditions. I'm talking about, conditions, life-changing conditions. People not being able to work, for example, or even being in bed and not being mobile, and so on, and being in pain. So when people bring those kinds of conditions, they're looking for an answer, and quite honestly, they don't care where it comes from.
At that point, not so much, right?
when you've tried everything and nothing seems to resolve the issue, then people will be open to try what may seem like quite unusual or unorthodox approaches. And so when people were coming to me in the very beginning like that, because I'd had the memories as a child, came to understand what they were about, which was really to lead me to working with people in this way so that I could help them understand their own memory imprints. Now, I should just say that the energetic imprints that I was just referring to a minute ago, that is what is manifesting as a symptom in the physical body or as an emotional behavioural issue.
Say that on energy imprints. Just to clarify, yes, energy imprints.
We were just speaking a minute ago, weren't we, about the imprints are held in the auric field.
Yes.
Yeah. And that those have been brought forward from the past. They're issues that weren't resolved in other times and resulted in some kind of trauma or a very significant memory. Now, when they're not resolved, they show themselves in life today as illness or disorders. And that can be physical, it can be emotional, it can be mental, it can be spiritual, depending on where the imprint is in the field. So if someone comes along with a physical condition, severe emotional problems, or mental health patterns that are causing great distress and disturbance, then they're already presenting to you. If by looking at the map of the body and understanding the body and the way the energy connects to the physical body, then you have the key to where these imprints are coming from. So that would be the starting point. And that's why I don't need to work with hypnosis or hypnotherapy. Right. It's simply an intuitive connection. So it's a meditational state. The person doesn't have to be a practitioner of meditation. And they will frequently say, well, I can't meditate and I can't relax. And they don't need to do. All they need to do is to be willing and open to the process. My job then is, the practitioner's job, is to take them through a relaxation process which opens up the energy field, and that reveals the imprint, and that reveals the story.
Yes, yes.
Now, one of the ways to do this without going into, for example, hypnotherapy, I'm not suggesting that hypnotherapy can never work. I know that it does, but it can be limiting as well. Mm-hmm. So one of the ways that we work is to align the energy from a very simple practice. We suggest to people, whatever the condition is, whatever the problem is, we suggest to them that they use an energy alignment technique, a simple practice, which begins the process of bringing the energy into its more natural form and expanding the energy slightly so that they're more able to connect at the higher level. That would be the beginning of the therapy program that I would work with past life memory. Now, in a minute, I'm very happy to take people through that process because it's not only used with past life work, it's a very valuable aid to everyday living, life and living. It's a key, very much so. We can use this with children, we can use it with the elderly, we use it with people with learning difficulties. You don't have to have any belief system. It's simply taking the person through a very simple, short exercise which assists the connection to the higher self.
And I know that you are most likely referring to the emerald alignment. Is that right? Thank you so much. I would be honored if you would explain maybe how that came to you quickly and then maybe take them into that state.
Well, it was certainly not anything I did. I was actually working in the very early days of my therapy practice, learning through experience very much and finding that the people who were coming along were presenting very diverse conditions. And I had to be coming from a higher understanding or a deeper understanding, connecting intuitively to them on the therapy bed. And of course, I had to trust that process implicitly. And I could only do that by working very, very closely over time and developing a relationship with guidance. When I did that, I found that I was given instruction as to what was best for that person at that time. And that's how the Emerald Alignment came, because I was working with a lady one day with a very intractable condition. Nothing seemed to be helping. And I heard the voice very clearly, and I was impressed to ask this lady to visualize the colour emerald and to imagine a line running straight through the centre of the body from the crown of the head to the base of the spine. This made no sense to me, but I followed the instruction because the instructions always work for me. And I did this, and then I was given step by step each time she came. I was given the next step. And it was a very simple process to bring this alignment through the energy field and into the body. Now, I should just briefly say it is emerald, because the emerald ray, this is the emerald ray we're working with this process. The emerald ray creates a fusion between spirit and matter. So it comes from a very high level, the deepest level of understanding, spiritual understanding. It's the emerald ray, and it comes from the causal body at a higher level, and it brings that energetic connection into the body and brings the physical body, the emotional feelings, the mental body, and the intuitive connections together. And that's why you can use it very, very quickly.
And I know we're pressing the end of the hour, so I'm going to let you take them out with that particular meditation. But just in case we're unable to have the full totality of it, you do have it on your website. Is that correct? At rainbowlight.uk.com?
Yeah, you can hear it on the website. We give this freely available to everyone, wherever.
That's a tremendous gift. Thank you so much. And if you'll take us in, and I may interrupt you, I'm so sorry, toward the very end because of station regulation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tracey. So, if listeners will simply take a moment and just sit and close your eyes. Sit or stand comfortably and take a moment to be aware of the thoughts and the feelings in the body, and aware of the crown of the head. Begin to breathe slowly down through the body, following the line of the spine, breathing down the spine, allowing any heaviness to fall away to the lower body as you breathe to the base of the spine. Aware of the hips and breathing down to the thighs, the knees, the lower legs, the ankles, the heels, and through the feet to the toes, out and away from the toes. And again from the crown of the head, breathing down to the top of the spine, across the shoulders, and down the arms, elbows to the wrists and into the palms of the hands, out and away from the fingers and thumbs. And pause and be aware of the body feeling lighter and more relaxed. And again to the crown of the head. Visualize a point of light above the crown of the head, and see the point as the colour emerald green. And breathing in and breathing down the body, drawing the emerald green to the crown and down through the body, through the spine, breathing down to the base of the spine and down to between the heels. And visualize the emerald line from the crown to the heels and into the earth.
Feel the body straight and balanced each side of that line. And again to the crown of the head, drawing the emerald green down to the top of the spine and across the shoulders. See the beam of emerald green from shoulder to shoulder, holding the shoulders straight and balanced. And draw the emerald green down through the arms, elbows to the wrists and into the palms of your hands. Aware now of the body feeling lighter, calm and relaxed. At a distance of arm's length, draw a circle of blue right around the body and visualize that circle as a clear, strong blue outline, sealing and protecting all of the positive energy within as you breathe slowly back into the center of the body to a calm, peaceful feeling.
Thank you so very much for joining us today. We appreciate it. Our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week for a view of life from a medium's perspective. And remember, it's never inappropriate to be kind, and without integrity, we have nothing. See you next week.